Money Ape was holding a $400 watch he definitely couldn't afford. The box was open, the receipt was still warm, and somewhere in the back of his brain, a tiny voice said, "Your grandfather worked 30 years and left nothing behind." Money Ape froze. That one thought in a watch store of all places was about to change everything. But first he had to figure out why he kept ending up here. Money Ape set the watch down on the glass counter. The salesperson smiled. The display lights caught the dial just right. It looked incredible, and for about 4 seconds, Money Ape felt like a different person. Successful, sorted, like someone who had it all figured out. Then he picked it up again and tapped his card. On the drive home, the high started fading. By the time he got to his apartment and set the box on the kitchen table, it was mostly gone. He looked at it. Nice box, nice watch. Very empty feeling. This wasn't the first time. There was the gaming setup he bought to reward himself after a tough month. The sneakers he told himself were an investment. The weekend trip that seemed urgent and necessary until the credit card bill arrived. Every single time, the buzz lasted maybe a day. Then he was back to normal, back to the same apartment, same account balance, same vague feeling that something was missing. But here's the thing. Money Ape wasn't a bad person with money. He had a job. He paid his bills. He wasn't reckless. He just kept choosing golden bananas. Immediate, shiny, satisfying for about 48 hours. What he didn't have was a banana tree. Something growing, something building, something that would still be there and bigger in 10 years. That night he sat on his couch, the watch still in the box, unopened a second time, and Googled something he'd never Googled before. How do you build wealth that lasts after you're gone? The results were overwhelming, dense, full of terms he didn't understand. But one line stopped him cold. Most people spend their whole lives thinking about this paycheck. Generational wealth starts when you start thinking about the next generation. Money. Ape stared at his phone for a long time. Then he thought about his grandfather. And the watch suddenly felt very, very small. Money Ape's grandfather had worked for 32 years at the same company, Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturdays. Came home tired, ate dinner, watched the news, went to bed, did it again. By all accounts, he was a hard worker, responsible, consistent, everything you're supposed to be. When he passed, he left behind a small savings account, a car that was mostly paid off, and a storage unit full of things nobody knew what to do with. No investments, no property, no assets that kept working after he stopped. Money Ape had never really thought about this before. It just seemed normal. Work hard, spend what you earn, retire if you can, leave whatever's left. But sitting on his couch that night with his grandfather in his head and a $400 watch in a box on the table, something landed differently. His grandfather had never been taught to think beyond the paycheck. Nobody in the family had. Every generation started from zero. Every generation struggled the same way. Every generation picked the golden banana, the immediate comfort, the visible reward, because the banana tree felt too far away and too uncertain. Money Ape opened his phone and pulled up his banking app. He had $847 in savings. He had a watch worth $400 that was already worth less than he paid for it. He had no investments, no assets, nothing working while he slept. He wasn't judging his grandfather. That felt important. His grandfather did what he knew. He worked hard and he provided. That was real and it mattered. But Money Ape had something his grandfather never had. Information, access, the ability to see the pattern clearly. The real question wasn't whether his grandfather had failed him. The real question was Money Ape about to do the exact same thing? He put the watch back in the box, gently this time, like it was evidence, because it was. 2 days later, Money Ape returned the watch. He stood at the same counter, same salesperson, and slid the box across the glass. The salesperson raised an eyebrow. Money Ape said, "It just wasn't the right time." That was technically true. It was not the right time for a $400 watch. It was not the right time for anything that disappeared the moment he stopped wearing it. He walked out with $380 back on his card return fee, because of course there was a return fee, and sat in his car. He felt weirdly proud, but also kind of annoyed, because he could already feel the itch, the vague pull towards something else shiny. A new camera, a weekend trip, something. This is where it got interesting. Money Ape started paying attention to the itch itself. Every time he had money sitting still, something in his brain got uncomfortable. Like the money wasn't doing anything until it became a thing he could hold or experience. like savings was just money waiting to be spent. He mentioned this to a friend who had recently bought his first property. The friend laughed. Not unkindly, just knowingly. That's the problem, the friend said. You think money is for spending. Rich people think money is for multiplying. Money Ape did not love hearing this. He sat with it anyway. Spending money felt productive. It felt like the money was being used. But money in an index fund? In a property? In something that grows quietly in the background? That felt like nothing. Like the money was just sitting there, doing nothing, except it wasn't doing nothing. It was compounding, quietly, invisibly, the way a banana tree grows before you can see the fruit. The problem was, his brain couldn't feel the tree growing. It could only feel the banana right now, and the itch was back. Because there was a camera on sale, and look, honestly, he'd been wanting to get into photography for years. Money Ape put his phone face down on the passenger seat. Not yet, he thought, but he wasn't sure how long he could hold out. And he didn't know yet why the pull was so strong. Money Ape downloaded a budgeting app. He spent one evening going through 3 months of spending. Line by line, it was not a comfortable evening. There were subscriptions he'd forgotten about, restaurants he barely remembered, an online purchase he genuinely could not explain, something from a website he didn't recognize for $34. He stared at it for 4 minutes. Nothing. But the biggest thing wasn't the random charges. The biggest thing was the pattern. Every time something went well at work, good meeting, finished a project, got a compliment from his boss, he spent money within 48 hours. Every time something went badly, stressful day, awkward conversation, feeling stuck. He also spent money within 48 hours. Both directions led to the same place. The golden banana was both a celebration and a painkiller. Money. Ape leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a while. He wasn't spending because he was irresponsible. He was spending because spending worked. It made good days feel like rewards. It made bad days feel manageable. The emotional math was flawless, in the moment. It just never lasted. And it never compounded. Meanwhile, the banana tree version, putting that money into something that grew, gave no emotional feedback at all. No ping, no rush, no feeling. Just a number in an account, getting slightly larger, invisibly, over time. His brain genuinely couldn't tell the difference between money sitting in a savings account and money disappearing. Both felt like nothing. Only the spending felt like something. This was the hidden force. Not laziness, not stupidity. Just a brain built for now, trying to survive in a world where the biggest rewards come from later. Money Ape sat with this for a long time. Then he did something slightly ridiculous. He took $50, just $50, and moved it into an investment account. His first one. Then he refreshed it 4 times in the next hour looking for results. There were none. Obviously, he laughed at himself. But he left the 50 there. A month later, the $50 was worth $52, $40. Money Ape looked at this number. $2.40. He had spent more than that on a single coffee. But something about seeing it, seeing a number that had grown without him doing anything, broke something open. He thought about the watch. $400. Already losing value the moment he put it on his wrist. Now worth maybe $250 if he sold it. Used, he thought about the $50 that was now $52 or $40 and had required exactly 0 effort. Since he moved it, then he did the math he'd been avoiding. If he invested $300 every month, roughly what he spent on random stuff he barely remembered, and it grew at a historical market average over 30 years. The number at the end was almost too large to feel real. He checked the calculation 3 times because he was sure he'd made a mistake. He hadn't. This was the realization that actually landed. It wasn't about getting rich quickly. It wasn't about some dramatic transformation. It was about time. The banana tree didn't grow overnight. But left alone long enough, with consistent attention, it became something that could feed generations. His grandfather had worked for 32 years and started from 0 every morning. But what if his grandfather had planted just one small tree? What if one generation had simply decided that some of the harvest went back into the ground? Money Ape thought about a kid he didn't have yet. Maybe someday. What if that kid started at 25 not with nothing, but with something already growing? What if they never had to stand in a watch store making a bad decision because they actually had options? He put his phone down. He picked up the empty watch box from his kitchen counter. He still hadn't thrown it away and held it for a second. Golden banana. Present. Gone. He put it in the recycling bin. Money. Ape made a spreadsheet. This was deeply unlike him. He was not a spreadsheet person. The last time he'd made a spreadsheet was for a group holiday trip in 2019, and he'd abandoned it after 20 minutes and just paid for everything. To make it easier, but this one felt different. He called it the tree. Column 1 was his current monthly spending on things he didn't really care about. Column 2 was what happened if he redirected even half of that into investments every month for the next 25 years. Then he added a third column. What if he kept going? What if he never touched it? What if he just let it grow, added to it when he could, and treated it like a non-negotiable the way rent was non-negotiable? The number in column 3 was genuinely shocking. Not buy a yacht money, but never start from zero again money. Give your kids a real foundation money. One generation changes everything money. He stared at this spreadsheet for a long time. Then he moved $300 into his investment account. Not because it was easy. It wasn't. It meant no weekend trip he'd been vaguely planning. It meant cooking more at home. It meant choosing the boring option in every small decision that month. But something had shifted. It didn't feel like deprivation anymore. It felt like planting. He thought about his grandfather again. Not with sadness. More with something like compassion. Nobody showed him the spreadsheet. Nobody showed him the banana tree. He just did what everyone around him did, worked hard, spent honestly, and hoped. Money Ape didn't have to hope anymore. He had a column 3. He closed the spreadsheet and opened the investment app. The $50 was now $54.20, plus the new $300. He refreshed it twice. Caught himself. Laughed. Old habits. But for the first time, he actually wanted to watch the tree grow more than he wanted the banana. 6 months later, Money Ape walked past the watch store. Same window. Same display case. Same lights making everything look more significant than it was. He slowed down, looked through the glass, and saw the exact same model, different color sitting exactly where he'd found it. He stood there for a moment. He wasn't tempted. That was the surprising part. Not because he'd become a different person, or because he'd taken some vow of minimalism, or because he'd read every personal finance book and transcended desire. He just did the math instinctively now. $400 gone, or $400 growing, invisibly, quietly, like a tree. He kept walking. The investment account was at $2,400 now. Not impressive by most measures, but it was 6 months old, and it had started as $50 that he'd basically dared himself to leave alone. He thought about his grandfather. He thought about the 32 years. The savings account. The storage unit full of things no one wanted. He thought about column 3. His grandfather hadn't failed. He'd worked with what he knew. But knowledge skips generations when nobody passes it down. And Money Ape had been handed a golden banana every time he needed comfort, every ad, every store window, every limited time sale, and nobody had ever handed him a seed. So he was going to plant his own. Not perfectly, not dramatically, a little at a time, every month, in a spreadsheet he'd named the tree, and someday 20. 30 years from now, maybe someone who came after him wouldn't have to stand in a watch store doing the math. They'd already know the math, because he'd left them the tree. Money Ape walked home, opened the investment app, and scheduled next month's deposit. Then he ordered dinner. Something reasonable. Something he'd actually remember eating. The golden banana still looked good. It always would, but the tree looked better.